You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph, and joined by none other than Chris here again on a Monday, off-season Mondays, you might call it. If our show had a name, we'd probably call it that. How you doing today, Chris?
I'm good. Might sound a little crazy, getting over a little bit of a cold a little bit, but I'm all good to go, ready to roll.
Oh no, well, I hope you feel better. But
Appreciate
today the topic that we're talking about, it's a typical off-season topic. You know, we gotta look at the grand scheme of things, the 49ers roster, what it's looking like right now, and think about what do these players need to do in order to make a leap in year two, or even in year three. There's some players who haven't they're now it's their third year and they haven't gotten a lot of playing time. So we're going to talk about some of those players, guys who need to step up. We have a list of the 49ers third-year players and second-year players going into the 2023 season. And so Chris and I are going to talk about who from this list needs to step up. Let's start with the third-year players, Chris. I think the biggest one that I think we'll all agree on is Trey Lance, right? And to this point, it hasn't really been his fault. He's dealt with a lot of injuries, but at every turn, like the entire time he's been with the 49ers, there's been some sort of competition or just some other quarterback, breathing down his neck, right? He, despite being the third overall pick, just 2 drafts ago, he still hasn't been that unquestioned guy. You can argue last season when he was QB1 over Jimmy Garoppolo, I mean, that was a vote of confidence. But since then, we've been getting mixed messages on the team and how they feel about Trey Lance. He's now going to be competing with Sam Darnold. I feel like Trey Lance needs to step up. And, I don't know what happens if he doesn't, right? But I think for obvious reasons, he's definitely one of the top players on the list for me.
Yeah, without a doubt. No, I agree with you. I mean, he's kind of the obvious one in that regard. I think any sign of regression, any capacity would kind of seal his fate. At least with the Niners, it'll write the book, for him. So I think spoiler alert, I also have the other QB, Brock Purdy on my list as far as second-year players looking to improve, ultimately because we want, the best person to hit the field, right? To your point, regardless of, the roster politics or the weirdness that's present, that always seems to be here in this offseason with the Niners as far as the QB position goes. We want the best QB on the field, right? So, certainly in this regard, talking about Trey Lance, really looking, for improvement, albeit a little difficult to do without being on the field, of course. But that being said, he's been, noted to be doing the like mental stuff, mental reps, helping when Brock was in and he was hurt, helping with, getting him prepared for game day and all that. So, hopefully, with his health right now, he's out there, apparently working out with Patrick Mahomes this week and that QB from UCLA, as well as Patrick Mahomes, his quarterback coach. This week and last week, he's been doing that. So it looks like he's moving around well. So hopefully he's working on some footwork, timing, his release, all that good stuff. So, but yeah, he's probably the biggest one, right? He's got to definitely show some improvement or at least, progress in order for him to even have a shot.
And I also want to point out the way that the names are listed here has obviously it goes by the draft order because the draft order that gives the context of why they need to step up for some of these guys. Some of the players who they picked up as undrafted free agents who happen to be on the roster today, or after, they picked up from other practice squads and whatnot, Daz Newsome, Curtis Robinson, AJ Parker, guys like that. They don't have a lot of pressure, right? So I think it's hard to say they need to do anything. um, but, I just wanted to point that out, that the way that it's listed here is kind of like based on the draft order, based on the context of, the value that the team put on this player. And so Trey Lance just a couple years ago was the top pick, and again, like I said, number 3 overall. So I think that puts extra pressure, and he hasn't lived up to that draft selection quite yet, right? So I think that's another reason why he's one of those guys for me that needs to step up. Another guy that I would say from the third year players is Jalen Moore.
Mm-hmm.
Moore is another guy who we have not heard his name at all, really. And it's getting kind of, I don't want to say worrisome, but it makes you wonder, right? Is there a reason? Is it because, of course, we have Trent Williams, so no one's really going to play over Trent Williams, but is it just that, or is it the fact that he's just not looking as good as maybe what they had hoped? Aaron Banks, also a guy who didn't play in his rookie year. He sat that first season last year, looked great being in a starting role. Now, Jalen Moore hasn't, despite getting the opportunities, I would say he's gotten the opportunities, just hasn't really, you know, come on for this offensive line. And when you look at the 49ers offensive line, I feel like there is room for competition and for guys to make some headway and take over some starting positions. Like it certainly seemed that way last season, where 49ers had like 3 new starters on the offensive line, and Jalen Moore just hasn't been able to crack that quite yet. So Jalen Moore is a guy for me, especially. I don't know if he does a lot of right tackle. But I don't think he does. I think he's mostly a left tackle, but I would say that uh, this is kind of a make or break year for Jalen Moore, um, if he wants to be more than just depth.
I agree. So he's on my list as well, actually. And something I failed to mention earlier is you were talking about this being one of those, typical offseason topics. I think it's critical, though, this conversation. I also think that the timing is great, too, with the draft about, 2 weeks away or whatever. It's around this time that, the team's doing it. They're thinking about who are the second and third year guys that we're looking to see improvement from, as well as the fact that, the team's about to draft some players who are going to be potentially competing with these guys, right? So, yeah, the timing of this conversation is pretty important. I do also have Jalen Moore on my list, notably because of looking into the future, right? I mean, granted, the fact that we haven't seen Jalen Moore play too much is a really good thing. That means that Trent Williams is out there most of the time, and we know how great Trent Williams is. But I think that it's important for him to have improvement, even if we don't see it on the field, right?
Yeah.
If he's making, with his dropbacks and his footwork and, his strength and so on and so forth, his craft really overall. If he is improving in those regards, and then beyond that, then it helps you to kind of look to the future a little bit when that day comes that Trent Williams walk away from the game. So I think it's important, certainly, for Jalen Moore to continue showing growth.
Yeah, I agree. And so to me, those are the big names for the third year players, right? There aren't a lot of other guys I feel like need to step up. Lenore did a phenomenal job last season doing just that. I think Hufanga, after, a up and down rookie season, I feel like last year he improved a lot. And so I think everyone else on this list is pretty good. Now, you can argue Elijah Mitchell. I don't know if he needs to step up. He needs to stay healthy. that's to me, the only thing he needs to do, because we know the talent is there, but as we know, the best ability is availability, and Elijah Mitchell just hasn't been available as often as the 49ers probably wish that he would be. So I think that's another key guy here. But again, talent, not an issue. Let's look at some of the second year players. To start off the list, and ironically, this guy would also be on my list, Drake Jackson. He was a 49ers second round pick last year. I love Drake Jackson and just the talent, the athleticism that he brings to the defensive line. I love how aggressive he is. He always keeps his hands up, at the line of scrimmage, and that's how he's able to get some of those balls batted down. So I love that. Obviously, we didn't see much of him in the second half of the season, and I don't know if the 49ers really clarified that, the reason for that, but we've heard, right, that it was because like his conditioning,
right,
wasn't really to the level of playing 20 games. And I think when people hear that a player's conditioning is not good or not good enough to be on the field, I think people take that the wrong way, right? Or just like kind of panic a little bit, like, oh, that's not good. That speaks to his work ethic. I don't think it's that. I think we got to keep in mind that a lot of these players coming from college, they don't have 20 game seasons. They don't even go up to 15, 16 or anything like that. Right. So I think we got to keep that into perspective. And I think for Drake Jackson, another year off season training and getting used to the NFL way of things. I have good faith that Drake Jackson will be further along in his development and conditioning, NFL conditioning, in year 2 than maybe he was in his rookie season. So I'm not too worried, although I do have him on the list. He needs to step up in terms of the conditioning, of course, but I'm not worried about it. I think that'll just come with time. But I also think he'll have a larger role in year 2, right? Like that's kind of the expectation, because Nick Bosa is not going to do it all on his own. We've seen that last season. And also the 49ers lost a lot of key rotational guys on the edge. And so Drake Jackson is going to be one of those guys who is going to need to step up, right? So that's where the conditioning that maybe wasn't, at NFL level last year needs to be there, because the 49ers are going to be very dependent on him being able to stay on the field and have increased reps.
I agree with you. Drake's on my list as well. With the defense for his second year, making a leap and making a jump. Just to add to what you were saying as far as some of the I don't know if controversy is the word, but some of the kind of like hand wringing that some people had as it related to Drake Jackson's conditioning. You're absolutely correct. The season is a lot longer, right, in the pro game than it is in the NFL. But then also with rookies coming into the year, they're doing a lot of draft prep. You've got people like potentially Drake Jackson losing weight for his 40 time and gaining that weight back after he runs that 40. They're doing a lot of visits, pre-draft visits, draft work, draft prep, all that other kind of stuff. So that's why, that rookie season to your second season, summer or off season, I should say, is typically so critical for rookies going into their second year. So I expect to see him maybe even transform his body a little bit. You know what I mean? I expect him to probably, get a little leaner, probably add some more muscle even. He's definitely a freak of nature and an athlete. The other aspect as to why sometimes, you break down, I think, going from the college game to NFL is just, the quality of the competition is better, right? You can't just simply out-athlete these guys. I mean, now you do have, we've seen, generational type players who are freaks of nature no matter what, level of play that they're on. But even your great NFL players have to make an adjustment, right? And I think George Kittle even mentioned that he had an issue with his rookie year as well. So, yeah, I think Drake, I think that to your point you were mentioning about him having a more important role on the defensive line, I foresee him getting his opportunities, but I don't foresee him getting his opportunities to the detriment of what they're trying to accomplish and build, right? Like Shanahan explicitly said, so did Lynch during the owners' meetings and such. Like, it sounds like, they've mentioned 2019, they've talked about how they feel as though the defensive line has regressed a little bit, albeit with us having the number one defense last year, and even I think a top 5 defense year before, and a top 10 defense even in 2020 when everyone was injured. But at any rate, they were saying they keep talking about when to get to that dominant defensive line from like 2019. So I think that Drake will definitely get his opportunities. I think he has to take advantage of them because otherwise, whether it's, some unknown free agent that they're still going to add to the team or a draft pick or whatever, or even kicking Eric Armstead to the edge sometimes on rushing downs, I can see him potentially, getting shuffled around if he isn't stepping up. I will, real quick, before we move on, Steph, I will talk about, I did have someone else on my third-year players to step up. You did mention Diamador Lenore, but he is on my list. And the reason why he's on my list is because, he did finish the year strong. I am not trying to jinx him in this regard. But the year prior to that, Ambry Thomas, of course, finished the year strong too, right? And then all of a sudden he's like vanished. So, I want him to continue to maintain his level of play that we saw the second half of the season, notably in the playoffs, getting 2 picks in the playoffs and such. And I think it would just better fortify that back end if he continues to show improvement and such. I think we already know what we have within, with Charvarius Ward, and now go into the season with, the believed, I guess you could say, starter and Diamador Lenore. If he steps his game up or is, playing the way he did the last, back half of the season, you have very little concerns on the boundaries. So he's the only other person I had for the third year players.
Yeah, I think about Lenore, I think it's important to still kind of wonder, okay, he finished the year strong. He had a great playoff campaign, but can he sustain that? Like, will that keep going? He's kind of someone who I think did step up, but he's someone who can't afford to have a setback of any kind. I think he's someone who has to keep it going. And that's kind of part of this discussion too, right? Because some of these players, maybe some of them did suffer a sophomore slump, or maybe guys who were first year starters, maybe they will suffer a sophomore slump, right? It's all kind of part of this discussion. And like you said, the 49ers definitely asking these questions themselves as well, right? As they head into the draft, as they look to, building out their team and trying to solidify their depth as well. So I think it's a good point for sure. Now, going back to the second year players, I feel like I'm going to continue going down the list. I mean, the guy just under Drake Jackson is TDP, right? Ty Davis Price. He's someone who I think there were, somewhat big expectations for him just based on where he was drafted. I mean, at this point, I think we all kind of expect or know not to get our hopes up too high for a running back that the 49ers draft before day 3. But, I still feel like we were expecting a little bit more, and especially because the 49ers did deal with some injuries to the running backs last season, before trading for Christian McCaffrey, of course. I think we would have liked to see more Ty Davis Price. And so he's a guy who, I don't know, it's kind of a fringe. Like it could go either way. Is this the next Trey Sermon, situation, or he can write a different path for himself where he steps up big time in year 2. He's someone I'm really rooting for to take a leap in his second year. Definitely would be welcome, because going back to Elijah Mitchell, another guy, Elijah Mitchell, who hasn't been able to stay on the field. That's why I think it's important for these depth guys to step up, and Ty Davis Price has to step up to, the position that the 49ers drafted him, right? He hasn't really brought that value yet so far. And he could be that guy. But to this point, haven't been able to do it. So Ty Davis Price, definitely one of those guys. And if the 49ers do end up trading Elijah Mitchell, like I kind of think might happen this season, again, they're going to need to see Ty Davis Price step up in order to feel comfortable doing that. So hopefully TDP takes the next step in year 2.
I agree. I think I have TDP and Jordan Mason kind of lumped in together, with TDP being a little bit ahead as far as who we need to see more from, because as we know, like Jordan Mason got more run last year than TDP did. So clearly, the running backs coach, Shanahan, they saw more out of Jordan Mason at that point in time, and they felt it with TDP. But then TDP, of course, is the third round draft pick. So to your point, I totally agree. Not necessarily for the purpose of unseating anybody, that being obviously, right. Christian McCaffrey's not going anywhere, and Elijah Mitchell, but more so in the same vein as I was talking about with Jalen Moore a little bit, being comfortable with the depth behind them. I hope Christian McCaffrey never has an injury ever again, but he has an injury history. Elijah Mitchell, I hope the same for him, but he has an injury history, right? So we want to be able to be comfortable and know for sure that, either TDP or Jordan Mason can step up and be the guy for what hopefully is only like a game or two at worst or something like that. And just simply dispel them, right? You get up late in the game, wear him out or wear him down with TDP or Jordan Mason. But most notably, just because of the injury histories with the two presumed starters, we definitely need to ensure. I shouldn't say ensure. We definitely would want to hope for Ty Davis-Price and Jordan Mason to take a step.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. You mentioned Jordan Mason, just because he was an undrafted guy who always that unassuming running back, right? That the 49ers bring in and just like blows everyone out the water. But I thought he had a pretty impressive, rookie season, all things considered, right? The fact that he was an undrafted free agent. So what would you like to see out of him in year two? Like, to take that next step?
Just more of the same. I think I would say more of the same of what he did last year, notably being able to put games away, be that dependable back that, when he's called upon, like in the Seattle game, kind of ice that game for us, towards the end there. So I want to definitely be able to, because I think about like back in 2019 when there was Matt Breida, Raheem Mostert, and I can't remember the cat's name from that played with Shanahan in Atlanta, but he was actually on the team last year too. Tevin Coleman, right? So I like how dynamic that offense was with those three different types of backs, being able to come in there and spell each other and then give the defense different looks throughout the game and also being fresh. So I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but I really think that I think Jordan Mason is going to be okay. I mean, especially with the experience that he had last year and how well he did when he was on the field and just getting better, just continuing to get better, not getting comfortable and really bring another element to the defense, to the offense the defense has to worry about.
Yeah, I hear you there. Cheap Crackhawk in the comments says neither TDP or Jordan Mason are home run hitters, and that is the reason why the 49ers will not trade Mitchell. I will say this. 49ers, they're going to bring in another running back in this year's draft, whether it be a day 3 selection or an undrafted free agent. Yeah. So there is going to be more competition. If it's a guy who, like Jordan Mason, who is so good, unassumingly, that, kind of makes some decisions tough. That's why I think Elijah Mitchell, who, again, can't stay healthy and is on the final year of his contract, these are some of the decisions that I think the team has to make. And so that's just the trend that I saw last season, or like, a couple seasons where they've been okay with letting go some of their guys, some of those guys in particular who can't stay healthy, but still have value because they do so well in Shanahan's offense that they have value, and certainly more maybe than you gave up for him in the draft. Elijah Mitchell was what, 5th or 6th round pick, right? So they can probably get that in return for him, and at worst a 7th rounder. And I think they would be happy to do that. But yeah, I mean, who knows? That's just my that's my thought at the moment, that Elijah Mitchell is someone who could be traded, not because he's bad, but for the reasons that I mentioned. And good point, though, that the 49ers really don't have any other home run hitting running backs. I feel that's something they have missed since not having Mostert, right? But I think they will look to bring that back with one of the running backs who they do select or who they do bring in as a UDFA after this draft. Most notably, one of the running backs who they met with both at the combine and at his pro day was Izzy Abanaconda at a Pitt, and he's kind of a home run hitting running back as well. So nothing's off the table. I mean, certainly once new players come into the picture, some guys are going to be on the outside looking in. So we'll just see. We'll see how it shakes out. Look, another guy who I have on this list, I'd say Kalia Davis, honestly. I mean, just because I think there were some high expectations for him too. Yeah, his rookie season, the whole plan was for him to rehab. He had torn his ACL, I think, the November before, the draft, right? So just a few months before. So the plan was always for him to pretty much redshirt his rookie season. But I think the idea was for him to take over as that DJ Jones type of defensive tackle, nose tackle, who they like to have clog the middle. That's something I think they missed. And I think that's part of the reason why they went and grabbed someone like Javon Hargrave because they were needing that. And I think they realized Javon Kinlaw is not going to be the guy who's going to give that to him, right? And they're slightly different players. So Kalia Davis, I think, needs to step up because I don't know if we can depend on Kinlaw stepping up, and two, Kinlaw being healthy enough to even be out on the field all season, right? So I think Kalia Davis is going to get some extra snaps this year, and hopefully, I'm excited personally to just see what he does with them, right? And I don't say he needs to step up because he's in danger of being cut or anything. But I think he needs to step up because that's what the 49ers probably expect and hope out of him. So Kalia Davis, one of those guys for me.
I would definitely agree with that. I'm looking forward to seeing how he looks coming out of UCF. Excuse me, from an expectation standpoint, yes. I mean, there's actually I would think that, if I were him, I'd feel some pressure, right? I mean, they drafted the guy injured, knowing he couldn't, play that first year, but they obviously believed in him enough to draft him while he was injured, right? So that being said, he's definitely got to be able to come and show them something. I think he will get a lot of run as well, given his productivity and such, especially, in what could potentially be seen as in base downs when, running the ball and such. I know PFF isn't everything, but I know that Javon Hargrave doesn't have the greatest, run stopping grade by PFF. They may look to spell each other in some of those base downs, and definitely make sure to have Javon Hargrave in there for those pass rushing downs, as well as the line share, right? You're not paying that guy that much money just to be a situational pass rusher. But at any rate, yeah, I definitely have Kalia Davis as well as someone to watch.
Yeah, for sure. Now, I feel like for me that kind of is wraps up the second year players. Danny Gray, go for it. You might say Danny Gray. The reason that I didn't say Danny Gray is because I know that the 49ers, obviously they have Debo, they have Ayuk, Juwan Jennings is going to be back another year. So they have their starters or their top guys set. And so from that standpoint, I don't know if he needs to step up. And quite frankly, I think he does, because I think the rookie season for all Shanahan receivers seems to be a rough one for most, where they're still, getting used to the offense, learning the playbook, all those things. So I am kind of confident that Danny Gray, makes a leap in year 2. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I'm confident too, and I'm hoping to see it. And what I mean when I said is, for whatever reason, right? On one hand, pundits, podcasters, fans will talk about how, Shanahan's offense, or at least Shanahan's time of being in San Francisco, they haven't really necessarily been slinging the ball over the yard, going deep or whatever. On the same token, though, Shanahan always has tried to have someone with that skill set on the squad, right? Whether it was like Pierre Garcon or Marquise Goodwin or Travis Benjamin last year, there's always that, speedster element, someone who can stretch the field. Now, granted, whether they get used as much as we would like, that's another story. I mean, Marquise Goodwin definitely got some run. He almost had 1,000-yard receiving year in 1 year, but he was also like the primary guy. But as it relates to someone who can bring that other dimension, get to that third level in the defense and be a deep threat. Shanahan always has that person on the squad, right? I don't know if it's a matter of trust. I don't know if it's a matter of just part of the scheme that he wants to be able to, open things up for underneath routes. I'm not sure, but I would like to see Danny Gray give us something for the purpose of even just utilizing him for some of those, deep routes, outside of just preseason. So I had Danny Gray. I had also Marcelo McCray-Ball because also on defense because of with Azeez, going over to Tennessee. I'd be curious to see, his development. He'll be probably on the field more. Obviously, at least that's a suspicion, right? We don't know what the depth chart's going to look like as of today, but my assumption is that he'd be the one that'd be slotted for like kind of stepping into that role. So I'll be interested to see how his development is. I think he's a player that the team is probably expected to continue on an upward trajectory.
Yeah, Marcelino McCurry-Ball, definitely an interesting one. Someone who I'm looking forward to seeing, in training camp, and does he take another step in year 2, because he looked pretty good in training camp last year. Of course, like not good enough to overtake or start over some of the guys who they already had, because it was a pretty deep linebacker group. But now, to your point, Azeez being out opens up an opportunity for McCrary-Ball. Also, Oren Burks, potentially. I mean, Burks has slightly more experience. But I think at one point or another, just because injuries do happen, and, honestly, Greenlaw, he's past couple years, he has dealt with some injuries on and off, right? So I think regardless of who ends up being the, not starter, but that third linebacker, I think the other guy will still get opportunities, whether that's McCrary-Ball or Oren Burks, right? So I think, next year we'll get a good idea what we have in either of those guys. But of course, McCrary-Ball being, again, like one of those unassuming guys who they brought in. I think he was an undrafted free agent, right? Yeah, I believe. So I think it's just a bonus. And when you have an undrafted free agent who kind of makes you go, oh, like he's nice. Like you kind of want to see more,
Right.
Just because you weren't so much expecting too much out of him to begin with. So
That's
definitely someone I'm excited for. Let's get to a couple comments here. Red Eye says Danny Gray's a bust, 10 targets, 1 catch for a lame 6 yards. His draft report was mid. I don't know if I think he's a bust. I mean, I think the jury's still out. I don't like to call any player a bust after 1 year, so I'll hold my judgment. But definitely there could be more development in year 2. Definitely some room for growth for Danny Gray. And I think, maybe the idea was never for him to be some, big starter all around wide receiver, right? Like you said, Chris, I think the 49ers just want a guy who can threaten taking the top off the defense, right? Threaten speed. And, Danny Gray could be one of those, rotational guys who you have in a package here and there.
Yeah, I agree. And, ultimately, I agree with you that I would like to see a little bit more from him. I mean, granted, those were his numbers, but he also didn't get on the field much, right? And I also understand that there could be reasons behind that as well. I don't know, but history has shown us, though, to your point that you made earlier. Shanahan's really rough on rookies in general, and he's really, really rough for whatever reason on rookie wide receivers. So it could be. I think it'll probably tell us more this year this training camp, OTAs, what Gray will or will not be in this offense.
Yeah.
I think he needs a little bit more time. Time will tell. Give us a better indicator of that.
Yeah, I agree. Cheap Crack Hawk says, could Quantrez Knight take over the role of Jimmy Ward? I know he isn't as fast, but he seems to play multiple positions. Yeah, that's interesting. I think he'll get a shot at like the nickel corner position, but right now that's looking kind of crowded. I mean, what they brought in Isaiah Oliver, they drafted Samuel Womack last season. I think they're content with Lenore being on the outside. Lenore can also play nickel. The Quantrez Knight also an option. So I think they have their options kind of cut out for them for nickel corner. Now, I don't know if Quantrez Knight would play any other positions. I think he used to play safety, right?
Yeah, so that's where I was going. I think that's a good question actually by the person who was watching on the live right now. Safety might be a thing, right? He maybe safety is a position that they have for the future after next year, potentially. I liked Quantrez Knight as a pickup. I think he was undrafted as well. He's one of the guys that we kind of looked at and scouted after the team had the draft last year. And if anything, I think safety might be the place that they're thinking about sliding him into in the future.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, now with Steve Wilkes as defensive coordinator, who has an eye for the secondary, I think I keep saying it. I feel like he knows what he wants out of his secondary guys. The kind of mold that he wants some of his players to be in. So, what if that means Quantrez Knight gets an opportunity at safety? Yeah. I know that they like positional versatility.
Yeah.
That is especially clear this offseason with some of the guys that they've picked up. And so Quantrez Knight definitely could be a guy who they can move around. And that's something that I think will keep him around on this roster, whether or not he gets a starting role or not.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that.
Now, Chris, do you have any names that maybe not necessarily second or third year players, but just a veteran that you think needs to step up? I know someone in the comments earlier said Eric Armstead needs to step up. Bryant Culp here thought Armstead needed to step up. So do you have any names you'd like to throw out there for a veteran?
So I could probably go off a little bit on this, but I'll probably narrow it a little bit. I think Jake Brendel played well last year. Pro Bowl alternate, obviously, relative to his peers, by virtue of the fact that he was a Pro Bowl alternate, that speaks to what, the league thinks of him and his ability. I like to see Jake Brendel maintain that level of play, if not even getting any better. You know what I'm saying? From a pass blocking perspective, as in particular, because in Shanahan's office, the center is so critical, as we know. But I want to ensure I want to see that Jake Brendel is definitely, from a vet standpoint, doesn't have a fall off. Another player that I identified as well, he'll be going to his second year, is Spencer Burford. So I think Spencer, starting at right guard as a rookie, graded well, played well. You didn't hear his name a whole lot the first part of the season. I think he had some, rough reps during some games towards the end of the year, which is understandable. I mean, you're playing tougher competition, better defenses and such. But he's got to maintain that, obviously, right? I mean, I feel that right side, well, really, outside of Trent Williams, right? We definitely, I don't know that we have a significant amount of certainty, going from week to week what that offensive line production is going to look like. We don't even know who the offensive right tackle is going to be even as of right now, right? We have some presumptions, but we don't even know that. That being said, having a year under his belt, playing well, building upon that confidence, seeing some teams multiple times already at this point, He'll be seeing teams next year that he's already seen, like the Cowboys, like the Eagles. So really being able to really continue to build upon that and solidify himself in that right guard position. But we'll see. I mean, I know we just got some free agents there, so he's gonna have some competition there. But he already knows the system. He already knows the playbook. So despite playing very well last year, I don't know that Spencer Burford is a for sure lock for that right guard position.
That's very interesting. I wouldn't have said the same, but I think that's a valid like perspective. Now I'm trying to think if I have one. I mean I would say Kinlaw, right? He's one guy who again just hasn't lived up to his, draft pick, the value, the 49ers took him and all of that. But it's at this point I'm like I want the 49ers to just agree that they're going to move on. I'm not saying they need to cut him this season. It makes sense to keep him around for his final year. But I don't want a year out of Kinlaw. Like, of course, I want Kinlaw to do great, but at the same time, like, I don't want a year where it's like it makes them question whether they should bring him back another year,
Right.
if you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course.
Because I don't know if you can depend on, him being able to be available for a second contract, right? So I guess so far he's made the decision pretty easy for the team. So I guess I wouldn't want that decision to be made too difficult. Although I do want him to step up, right?
Certainly.
So that one's a tough one.
Yeah, one other one that I have, and people may come for me on this, but I'm gonna say Debo. Like,
Tough one, man.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I need to have all pro Debo. I mean, that'd be awesome. Shoot, that'd be great if we had all pro Debo. But to the point of being available, taking care of his body, the production, I just want to continue to see growth from Debo, and I'm not sure that from his rookie season to now. And I know production isn't always linear, right? It's not just a straight line. Sometimes you have ups and downs and so on. But when you're comparing apples to apples, and you're looking at how Brandon Ayuk has been progressing from year to year, it's pretty much a constant pace, right? Despite the fact of him being beyond his control, being in the doghouse or whatever beef him and Shanahan had or whatever. So I almost feel as though it's like 2 steps forward, a step back with Debo sometimes, 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. So, I want to continue. I want to see Debo to continue to, stack good seasons. That's ultimately, I think, what I'm saying. Again, 2021 was out of this world. I'm not necessarily saying that he'll be able to recreate that, but being on the field for one, making it through the majority of the season, being productive, and Debo's getting paid. I hate to, it's sometimes, I guess unfair, right, to expect certain level of production out of a player, because they signed a contract. But on the same token, you're getting all this money, you're the guy, so we need Debo to be the guy, right? I would argue that right now, most people would probably say that Brandon Ayuk is probably the guy at receiver. Well, he's not getting Debo money though. You know what I'm saying? So I would like to see Debo, step up and from a production standpoint as well as just availability. First and foremost, availability. I think the production will follow naturally because it's Debo, but it'd be great to see him be more available.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what was it? 2021, right? Was a outlier, whatever. And that season or that type of production, I don't think will ever be repeated. Maybe by Debo or possibly even anyone else.
Right.
So it's tough, but I agree that there needs to be like just more consistency and coming into the season, strong. Not just okay when the playoffs you turn it up. always be at the top of your game. I think that's fair. That's fair to say. Niner sickness here. Last question we'll take because I got to get out of here and do a prospect interview after this. Niner sickness asks, I'm curious, Steph, are you team Trey or team Brock? Wow. I can go on forever on the subject, but actually I'm going to make it quite simple. I'm team neither. I'm team 49ers. You know what I mean? Like whichever quarterback ends up being the best or looking the best. And hopefully the 49ers make that right decision, right? Who they feel is the best is truly the guy. I can't imagine, there would be certain politics around that because they want to win too at the end of the day. So I have faith that they're going to pick the right person to lead this team. So that's the team I'm behind. I don't have any agenda towards any narrative towards any of these quarterbacks. I root for both of them. I think they both have great stories, and so vastly different in terms of their path to the NFL and just their skill sets as well, right? So I think I could be excited for either, and I think a lot of people need to feel that as well. So I'm team whatever quarterback is the best quarterback for the 49ers. That's it.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree.
All right. Well, we're going to call it with that. We talked about the players that need to step up. We're getting really close to the draft, people. So we'll be talking about, some of those guys here in the next week or so. And the 49ers have their local pro day coming up. That will be happening on Wednesday, the 12th. So they're about to have a little over 40 players that are going to be at Santa Clara Levi Stadium practicing with the team. They'll be doing a workout and all that. So the 49ers will get a good look at a lot of local guys. I am actually doing a prospect interview right after this. I'm going to have Ty Okada on the podcast out of Montana State. So make sure you guys tune into that in a few minutes. But for now, have a good rest of your afternoon, people. Peace.